Alright, so I picked up these 5 sheets of 2-inch 4x8 sheets of foam insulation. Okay, so I picked up a 4x8 sheet of 1/4-inch plywood. I already busted the corner down there because I dropped it once. I got a big thing of Gorilla Glue, and then I got a couple small cans of Great Stuff filler foam, and I got these 2 shaping tubs, and something that's an added bonus, these actually have like a ruler molded into the side of them, so that'll be useful in a little bit. Okay, now I've trimmed out the plywood and I've set the tubs down in there, and I found loop eye, and you can't see it, but there's actually a hole in the front of this tub, and I'm gonna drill a hole and mount that through there. So this is the configuration. I trimmed it down to 6.5 feet by 3.5 feet just because that's what will fit in my van, and I'm trying to keep this under 50 pounds total. Alright, and here I've taken some 2x2 furring strips, and I have screwed and glued them into the 1/4-inch plywood, and I Gorilla Glued the whole way. I took the orbital sander and I hit all the corners and just smoothed everything over real good. Now I'm going to use this as a pattern to trace out where I need to start cutting my styrofoam. So here I've cut out the first layer, and the raft is upside down right now. I'm going to trim out all my layers and figure out the taper I need as I go up, because I want to bond all of the sides of these containers with the expanding foam to the styrofoam, and then Gorilla Glue each layer after layer until I get it all built up. So now I've trimmed out layer 2, and I've saved the pieces of plywood from the deck that I used to cut out the for the tubs, and I'm going to glue those pieces of plywood onto the bottoms of the tubs, and then continue layering the styrofoam up. Okay, but before I get too crazy, first I have to mount my front loop, and I'll have to trim the layer 1 styrofoam to accommodate for the bracket inside. So I'm going to start on that right now. So something like this on the top, and something like this on the bottom. So I'm going to cut the styrofoam notch out for that. Alright, now I've masked off the edges of my tubs with 2 layers of black tape, and I've set them up so they have support on the rib part, and it won't interfere with the furring strips on my deck there. And I'm going to try some triple expanding foam. I'm going to run a bead inside the channel of the tubs, set the deck on, and put a bunch of weight around it, and hopefully not make too much of a mess. I also had to remember to leave clearance here so I can fit the loop eye through. I've done the foam, and I just stacked a bunch of weight around the edges, and it's starting to come up. That bead's looking pretty good. And my goal is to get as much of this foam stuff to contact the black plastic as possible. Okay, well, the expanding foam didn't stick to the plastic very well. It sticks, but you can peel it right off. So I hit up the outside of the tubs with an orbital sander. Then I ran another bead around the inside of a Gorilla Glue just as a secondary reinforcement. I'm going to lay Gorilla Glue, kind of like a net pattern across all this wood, and we're going to stack layer 1 on top and weight it down and wait a few hours and see what we get. I've got layer 1 glued on, and I've got a bunch of weight stacked on it. Now for when I glue on layer 2, I'm going to Gorilla Glue all the foam, and then I will, in this gap around the tubs, I'll use the expanding foam and lay down the second layer and stack all the weights back on it. Okay, so here's my foam and glue all laid in, and now it's time to set that panel on and put the pressure on and then wait. Okay, now I'm ready to glue the wood to the back of this tub. So it's all sanded up, and I got it on some jack stands and a board to give it bottom support. Then I'm gonna glue the wood on there, probably with a combination of Gorilla Glue and expanding foam. Then I'm gonna stack car batteries on it to squeeze it real good. Okay, and now I've got the underside supported a little differently, and I've got layer 3 on there. And the batteries are still holding the plywood for the other glue. So layer 4, I will only have to cut a hole for the front tub. I'll be able to go all the way across the back tub, but I'll have to fill in that half-inch gap with probably just a bunch of triple expanding foam, I suppose. So now layer 3 is glued on, and I got the plywood glued onto the front tub, and I'll have to fill in that big old gap down there with foam. Then on top of the plywood on this back tub, I found a scrap piece of 3/4 inch, which brings it flush with the top of layer 3. And I'll have to fill this whole edge in with foam. But what that'll allow me to do is, see, I only have to cut the front hole for the next layer, and then I have a piece of 1 inch to stack on top of this plywood, and that'll bring me up flush with the next layer. So when I get all of layer 4 glued on, it should look like this, and that should be flush. So for layer 5, the bottom layer, I just have to trim the length. Alright, so I got layer 4 glued down, and I cut off all the big bubbles where the foam expanded out. I'll just get these weights off here and glue it up and put on layer 5, the bottom, and then it'll be time to flip it back over right side up. Okay, and now I finally have layer 5 glued down, and it took every last drop of Gorilla Glue that I had, and I actually had to go out and pick up a couple more of those small cans of expanding foam, so I'll have to add that into the cost of the project. But anyway, 4 hours from now I can flip this over and take a peek at it and decide how I'm going to trim it, and then design a seat from there once I figure out my center of buoyancy. Alright, well, layer 5 is glued on. It's not bonding quite like I wanted it to, but I took all the weights back off and it sprung up a little bit. I'm gonna try to flip it over and work on it from the top side now. I tipped it up and it's really not too heavy, but it's so wide it's hard to grab onto. But now I think I'm gonna try it in the pool. she is floating in the pool. You can't tell on the camera. Well, you can't see it, but the draft is like the thickness of my finger. And the floor, when you stand on it, actually feels really solid. I mean, that feels really good. You can feel the air underneath it. This back one, wow. Man, that came out nice. That is strong. It's very fishable. I'm happy so far.